WMMR. Yes, from the Union LP and Miracle of Life. And we're having breakfast with Yes right now, Alan White, and it's all being brought to you by Quincy's, to the all-new Quincy's in the Adams Mark Hotel. The travel on this, we were just talking about that here. Around the world in 80 dates, which has now been increased to around the world in 84, and I guess 85 if we include the new Philadelphia show that was just announced.
Right, yes.
Friday, July 12th.
I mean,
is that when it is?
Right. Tickets go on sale this Saturday. Is this a more hectic schedule than you guys are really used to, even for a Yes tour?
Not really. Yes, we usually, when we're touring, have a pretty heavy schedule. This one's kind of in there, though. We're doing 5 gigs in a row, currently starting with Philadelphia, and then we have a day off, and then we do 6 gigs in a row, so it's 11 gigs in 12 days. So by the end of the 12 days, people will really need to get that day's rest.
And then, if I'm correct, sometime toward the end of May, you stop in the States, then do Europe, and then come back to the States again.
Yeah, we actually get 5 days off to get to Europe. And then start in Europe, and we do 4 or 5 weeks in Europe, and then have another 5 days off and start here again. I think Miami.
We know what Yes is like in the States, and, you know, I have to assume that as there are massive Yes pockets, and there are work markets in the United States, what are those Yes pockets in Europe? Because I saw on the itinerary Zagreb. I mean, I can't picture Yes in Zagreb.
These are kind of new areas for us. There's Athens. We're playing Athens. We've never been to Greece before, and but
it's supposedly a very big rock and roll market.
Right. So I understand. Most of Europe is quite big for Yes. I mean, Germany's a big area. France is certainly very big. Tales of Topographic Ocean was #1 album in France, so that will tell you the kind of area they deal with there. And of course England, where the band started. So there's lots of pockets in Europe also where the band is a very big band.
A difference in European audiences for you?
In some cases, yes. They're more laid back, as it were, and show their appreciation at the very end of the concert rather than every number. But there's polite applause all the way through, as it were, but none of the heavy stuff till the end of the show. Also in Japan, it's pretty much the case in Japan too. I remember last tour we played in Japan, which was Big Generator tour. We went to Japan, and it's almost like somebody holds a sign up and says, "Okay, you can clap now," and they all stand up and clap, and then sit down all together.
Precision appreciation.
And then start the number, and then what capped that off at the end of the show? In fact, the show where Trevor hit his head. The people who were like the ushers are dressed in uniforms, and the crowd filed out 1 row at a time. So that tells you the organization.
Wow.
You can go now like in a church. Or like,
you guys look at each other and say, what's going
on here? Yes, absolutely.
93.3 WMMR. Alan White is our guest. We're going to take care of some business and be right back.
Pierre Robert and John DeBella. We're here having brunch with Yes. Alan White is our guest this morning. It's brought to us by the all-new Quincy's in the Adams Mark Hotel. And, Alan, I wanted to ask you, I had heard that you were quite a Beatles fan and had a lot of Lennon memories, particularly. We're having a thing this weekend, a Strawberry Fields Radiothon. The Fairmount Park Commission, which is the largest city park in the United States, by the way, has given us this tract of land and modeled after Strawberry Fields in New York City. Do you have Beatle influences? Are you inspired by John's music?
Absolutely. Well, I played with him.
Really?
For quite a while. I did the album Imagine, and I got to know him over a 3 or 4 year period very well. I used to stay at the house with him. And
what were your impressions of him?
Oh, he was an absolutely wonderful person to be around. A man with lots and lots of direction, and he pretty much everything used to pretty much revolve around him. He had a good idea of everything he wanted to put on record. And in fact, before we did Imagine, he gave me all of the lyrics to the whole album and said, "Look, this is what you're going to be saying to the whole world. You must read them all before we get into the music." And it was all done. It was all packaged. And by the way, that album it took 8 days to record and mix the whole thing.
Really?
It was a great experience.
And with less tracks than we use nowadays.
That's right.
What about the
On an 8-track machine, and that was a lot. So the Beatles used to record on 4.
Plastic Ono Band, were you a part of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was part of Plastic Ono Band when I was in my early 20s, I think it was about 3 years prior to joining Yes, actually. And I was playing with my own kind of local band in London. And I got a telephone call from him saying, I'd like you to play a gig tonight. Well, I saw you play the other day in this club in London. And I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a prankster. And in the end, it turned out that it was really John Lennon. And my band were severely annoyed that they couldn't do the gig we had planned for that night. And in the end, I went and played Peace in Toronto, the live album.
Were you somewhat overwhelmed when you met him the first time, or
I
do you recall that
first
experience?
met him in the VIP lounge at London Heathrow Airport. I just got dropped off by a limousine, and there was sat Lennon and Yoko and Eric Clapton and Klaus Fuhrmann. And that evening we played together in Toronto, and we rehearsed on the plane. I had a pair of sticks on the back of a plane seat, and there was 2 acoustic guitars, and we all sat around in the plane.
You're kidding.
No. And Eric Clapton's going, do you know the version of Chuck Berry's this and that? You know, the one with the extra. I said, I think so, but I'll just busk it. Everybody did that night.
We're trying to get this Strawberry Fields happening here, and we're asking for folks to send money over the course of this weekend. His ideals, do they particularly have an impact on you?
Oh, absolutely. He was absolutely wonderful person as far as what he wanted to say to the world, and to give peace a chance, and everything peaceful about it was fantastic.
And it was legitimate, too. It was for
absolutely.
real.
100%.
So you'd encourage folks to call up this weekend and give us some dough.
Absolutely. Donate money.
93.3 WMMR, and this is an appropriate time for this tune. Not a Yes song, but I think you'll understand. Alan, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
Thanks for being here. 93.3 WMMR, John Lennon.
Yeah, I'm going to get some corned beef hash.
Go right ahead.
You want some?
No, thank you.
John thinks they're hot dogs. Thinks they're hot dogs.
We heard that earlier. Our brunch with Yes and winding down. John having a cheese blintz.
Bacon. What about bacon? Come on, give it a try.
Don't even insult me like that.
But did you notice
14 years. I've been a vegetarian for 14 years.
Scrambled eggs with vegetables. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I heard. That was nice.
You like that?
Yes.
Did you have your all brand?
I'm going to in a minute.
Okay,
We have to.
make sure you remain a regular guy.
I'm very regular in an irregular sort of way. We'll pause for a couple of messages and come back and play one more Yes song right after these words. Pierre Robert and John DeBella here.
Blintzing away.
Blintzing away.
Croce's going to kill me for I'm blintzing. There's something, because I know somewhere out there Steve Howe is driving and listening to this.
Yeah.
And it was wild because in Atlantic City, I didn't get to see him at all. And then last night, I saw him briefly, and he said, "Hi, John." I said, "Oh, God, how you doing?" And he says, "Hang on, let me change." And then didn't see him again. And I was feeling like a real, booty, right? Because I'm not Trevor and I can't say the words he says. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me, wait a second, right? I was there. I was waiting. I was looking for you. You disappeared. So I have just cast off my guilt. So, Steve, have an enjoyable drive to Worcester, and we'll see you in July.
Why do these people drive?
Because it's a beautiful country in which we live, Pierre. You know, we've all gone to look for America.
That's not the song we're going to play.
I know, we're going to play All Good People.
So don't steer us in a left-hand turn when we're going to turn right. Our little brunch with Yes, it started as breakfast, but it turned into brunch. It's been brought to you by the all-new Quincy's and the Adams Mark Hotel. And we're getting ready for the workforce blocks. They'll be coming along at noon. So we'll play one more song from Yes to take us up to the noon hour from 93.3 WMMR. Now you can play that tune. You like them? 93.3 WMMR in Philadelphia, the home of rock and roll. And all good
Just
people
when
from
you
Yes.
thought you were done.
Just when we thought we were done, Pierre Robert and John DeBella, and we're joined now by Chris Squire from Yes. It's wonderful to have the one member who's been in every incarnation of the band sitting across the table from us. Good afternoon now, Chris. We know you've been up for hours, did, I believe, a couple of jogs through Fairmount Park.
Yeah, I've been getting ready for this.
Right.
And,
Past our Strawberry Fields location, and we're excited that you're here visiting with us today. Nice to have you.
nice to be here.
I wanted to ask you a couple of things. In your solos, you're on stage combining a whole bunch of different songs, including, interestingly enough, Amazing Grace. A little piece
or
little
Amazing
snippets of
Bass.
that. Amazing Bass.
Well, why do I do that?
Yeah.
Chase so hard, you do those around you.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting mix of little tidbits that you throw into your solos.
Yeah. Well, as you know, like, there are bits from the drama album, Tempest Fugit, little pieces like that,
Right.
and there's also some nights I'll throw in Sound Chaser from the Relayer album. And Amazing Grace, I don't quite know how that came about. I think it was just through when I was sound checking one day. I think it was in Memphis or something like that, and I had sound on the bass, and I was checking my bass pedals out, and it just popped into my head to like, oh well, if I put this foot here, it's on the D, and if I play this, and I can play that tune, and I kind of just like worked it out as a kind of a thing, because I had half an hour at a sound check in Memphis, and that's how it came about. No other bigger reason than that.
I was unable to see it in Atlantic City, but my vantage point last night was much better. And I noticed at one point, and I believe it's in Starship Trooper, at the end of Starship Trooper, you're playing the bass and you're playing foot pedals at the same time. I mean, or is that just effects that you're throwing in?
No, they are. Yeah, it's a keyboard bass I play as well. That's what that real low end stuff here is.
But you're playing bass at the same time too.
And sometimes I sing as well and try to remember the words.
Chris, you're also one of the few bass players that uses a pick.
Well, yeah, I do, and then I've developed a whole thing now where I sometimes use my fingers for certain pieces and my thumb. You know, I've got a whole array of styles that's now part of the way I play a whole show.
I heard a story that you were at the Marquee Club in London a long time ago, and that you taught Jimi Hendrix bass player a few lines. Do you recall that?
Well, I remember meeting Jimmy in the Marquee dressing room the night before his very first show ever in London, and we happened to be, well, it wasn't Yes then, it was my old band called The Sin, I believe.
Yes.
S-Y-N, folks. And I remember loading in the equipment to the place and listening to Jimmy trying to teach Noel Redding how to play Purple Haze, which he couldn't quite get, and so they didn't do it that night, and I thought, God, because that was the first time I'd ever even seen a black man play like rock guitar, in my life, and I really didn't know what the evening show was going to be like, because I thought, well, who's going to come and see this guy? I've never heard of him, and I've only been out of town for a week, doing gigs. And he came back to the dressing room and he started talking to me about Rickenbacker basses and how a friend of his in Seattle had this and that. And I kind of thought, he seems like a nice guy. So then I went off to have a dinner, and when we came back to do our support show, the place was so packed. I was amazed, and we went down very well. Of course, the first 4 rows of the Marquee Club had people like George Harrison and Lennon and Pete Townsend and Steve Winwood. Everyone in the world was sitting there watching our little opening act, and we were kind of going, well, here's an up-and song, and we were going down real well. And I was never sure whether it was because they were waiting for Jimmy to come on, So, of course, then he played, and that was his first show ever in London, and it was a pleasure to have met him in a way before I had any pretense. or preconditioned ideas about.
Is this set of people you have on stage now, I mean, how enjoyable is this for you to be able to, like, do any combination of yes you really want?
Well, it's pretty enjoyable. I mean, actually, it's going far better than I thought. And of course, we do have a slight safety in numbers protection factor here. So, like, somebody goes wrong, it's kind of like, oh well, there's a covering factor.
Except for you, you're the only bass player. You got
right.
two drummers, you got two guitar players.
I know. Exactly. No one else can be blamed for that part. But, yeah, no, I mean, the whole show is very exciting. I mean, I'm enjoying this tour a lot, much more than I thought I would.
Why do you say that? You much more than you thought you would?
Well, because I always, although I could see the upside to having Trevor Rabin and Steve Howe on the same stage, until it happens, you're not really sure if it actually whether it was going to work or not. But, surprisingly enough, the combination of Rick and Tony Kaye and, of course, Bill and Alan, which was the most difficult factor to understand. Can two drummers work it out to, make it work? And they did, and it's a pleasure.
There was a question a listener of ours had. The only other members of Yes not included in this particular combination were Peter Banks and Trevor Horn, Jeff Downing, and Patrick Moraz. Any thoughts on them?
Jeff Downs.
Jeff Down, I'm sorry. That's right. Any thoughts on why they weren't invited to join this?
Well, I think mainly because in Bill, Rick, and Steve, you're sort of seeing the basically the mainstay of the 70s band, and and of course in Trevor, Tony, and Alan, that's the mainstay of the 80s band, even though Alan was there from 72. But it's kind of the other guys were, I guess they weren't there long enough. They're in and out for a couple of years, and so we talked about maybe doing a show maybe later on when we come back to the East Coast, where we actually had those guys.
Really?
Just do maybe one show or something like that.
Well, it would have to be Philadelphia.
Well, I suppose it would have to be, wouldn't it?
It would have to be the stage would have to be as large as the Spectrum itself, though.
Bill had brought up the point earlier that with some of these European dates, I mean, it's great seeing Yes and around, and for the combination of people you have up there. I mean, you would need to be, but in some of these European dates, like you get to Budapest and Zagreb.
Yeah, I can't wait to get there.
Right. I mean, you may be forced into a regular proscenium stage situation. I mean, what do you do?
Well, I know the production crew already have a design for that thing, and that's going to be another phase. Very often after you've done a show that's like a production show like this, and then you go somewhere where the facilities are not set up for that kind of a show, and you just play more of let's just put the amps at the back and you plug in and play. Sometimes those are the best shows as well. So it's like, as long as it keeps changing, that's all that matters to me. You'll see perpetual change.
In terms of change, do you consider, Chris, that this is a new beginning, or some have said, well, maybe this is a final tour? Is this an ending or a
no
beginning?
talk of any finality here. This is something that we've talked about for years, John and I, as a possibility. And as I said, I'm fairly amused and amazed that it's actually become a reality and that it is going so well. And I think, we'll probably be doing this to the end of the year. And cool. The next thing will be the next thing. But, we just started this thing.
The reason why I'm kind of bummed here is because the tour manager, Rex King, who, if you translate that, he's King. And I have become acquaintances, and I'm looking at the clock, and I know that you have an airplane to catch, and I don't want to cut this short, but at the same time, I would like the acquaintance to stay on the level that it is, because I would love to do this again.
I think we're okay for a bit, but I've got to tell someone to get my bags out of the room.
Oh, all right. Well, then let's talk about the new record. A couple of songs that we've gotten to so far are A Miracle of Life and Saving My Heart, and of course the single. Other songs, I mean, do you have, other than those, what are favorites for you?
Well, I also like Let Go, which of course I wrote, but that has no influence at all.
Is there a song of the ones that we have available?
Yeah, these are the only ones that we have available.
Oh, I see. Oh, it's
but it's there. The more we live, let go.
Yeah, the more. Yes, yes, right. Yeah. Strange enough, the reason why one of the reasons why we're playing Shock to the System on stage is because that's basically comes from the Anson Bruford Wakeman How Camp part of the album, and strange enough, when I first heard their stuff, because I did some of the backing vocals on their tracks, where Tony Levin's playing bass, thank you very much. That's one of the songs that I thought was very, very good from them.
Do you like Tony Levin as a bass player?
I think he does a great job, yeah. I mean, it's like, we're kind of both very different, but of course he has that relationship of having played with Bill in the past, so, they have a good thing, they work well together.
Well, without any further ado, I think it's time that we let go. This is from Union, 93.3 WMMR.
So thanks for that. Caught Yes again last night.